Cancer in men is projected to rise during the next 25 years despite more advanced medical technology.
WGEM's Zeke Shapiro explains the concerning prediction and how to prevent it.
In August, the Cancer Medical Journal came out with an alarming study. By 2050, men's cancer is expected to rise by 84.3%, from 10 million to over 19 million cases. Of those cases, the mortality rate is projected to rise by more than 93%. In countries with high human development indexes like the United States, cases are expected to rise by 50%. Preventative measures are now becoming more widely stressed for men earlier than previously recommended.
One of the main modifiable risk factors, besides stopping things like smoking and drinking alcohol, is having a good primary care physician where men can have that discussion to assess their risk and whether they should be screened or not.
One of the main leading causes for the expected rise has to do with the lack of available resources for men. Preventative measures for female-specific cancers are available, as seen with the declining mortality numbers for cervical cancer. However, for men, the same robust testing methods are not as available.
Of course, there's stool tests, lab tests for particularly men, a PSA, but those aren't routinely done on all age groups. We have to weigh family history and age in certain tests.
Basic lifestyle changes can also be imperative in preventing cancer later on in life. Cutting back on alcohol consumption and tobacco usage, along with maintaining a healthy diet and consistent exercise, can prove important to maintaining men's health.
Stopping smoking, reducing alcohol consumption, obtaining and maintaining a healthy weight, just having a primary care physician to help gain access to the medical system would be one of the most modifiable things you could do.
Checking in with a physician regularly to conduct preventative and detection exams can be the difference between life and death later down the line. In Quincy, Zeke Shapiro, WGEM News.
And the American Cancer Society recently concluded that men should start receiving colonoscopies starting at age 45, not age 50.